Hi, everyone. Today I am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Erik Donovan, who is the head of digital policy at Ibec. Erik is an expert in all things digital, not just in Ireland, but he plays a huge international role for us in Brussels, at the OECD. He's actively involved in the Trade and Technology Council as well as the B9 Plus. So welcome, Erik, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Jackie. Great to be here talking to you today.
And so today, of the many things you cover on All Things Digital, we're going to be talking about AI. And, it's dominating conversations everywhere in some way, shape, or form. You can't go a day without reading the news, without seeing it somewhere. And many people understand why it's so important to AI technology companies to be paying attention to what's going on. Why do you think all business needs to pay attention to what's happening?
Well, certainly here in Europe, there's a number of imperatives driving that, Jackie. I suppose the first is a kind of a political imperative. Both the EU as a group, but also in Ireland, have set a target of 75% adoption of AI for enterprise by the year 2030. So there's a political imperative first. Second thing is digital and AI readiness actually matters economically. I suppose the takeaway is that uh, Ireland and certainly a lot of the D9 plus already have quite digitalized economies, and that's why AI as a key suite of technologies is an important consideration. So if we think about Ireland, for instance, there's around 90,000 people employed in the ICT sector, as you alluded to, half of which are with indigenous companies. But what people don't realize is that there's three times that number who are actually working with digitally intensive companies. So that's 270,000 people, right? And there's about 29% of manufacturing jobs in Ireland are in high tech sectors. That's four times the EU average. Again, the reason why I say that is to illustrate the point that there are areas that are open to more digitalization, and AI would have a role in that. And I suppose something that's kind of almost forgotten, even at a national level here, that there's about 41% of our goods and services produced in our economy are transacted digitally. So really what I'm driving at here is uh, digital's already here, AI is already here. There's industry studies saying that, there's return on investment of about 14 months, I think, in terms of generative AI. And there's a study done by implementing consulting there for Google last year, which was saying that adoption of AI could boost D9 plus regions GDP by about 500 billion euros. So these are kind of significant numbers. And as I said, it's not one sector, as you said, because it's a very, very good insight you have there on that, Jackie. It's across the economy, and it's public sector as well as private sector. Now, so I mean, currently there's at EU level, there's about 1 in 10, about 8%, right, of all enterprises are using AI. In that was in 2023, and Ireland's is comparable to that. But also, when you look at the figures, there's 37% of larger enterprises are actually using AI. So there's a kind of a small versus big kind of split. And I think there was a study done there recently as well. Trinity College and Microsoft. It was about 49% of companies are using generative AI um, in Ireland. But again, they found a divide between um, multinational and indigenous organizations. Bigger firms are leveraging AI more at the moment, and I suppose we've got to kind of address that divide. So we do, as I said, we have a political imperative, we've got an economic imperative, and there's, I suppose, a regulatory imperative as well. Now that we've seen, the EU AI Act, it's nearly over the line. They expect it to be adopted by the middle of this year, which will also have an impact on adoption across the economy.
Yeah, and you made some excellent points there, and I think even the divide between the big multinationals and the smaller guys, the imperative also is a competitiveness advantage for those that adopt earlier than rather than later, and certainly there are different states that are taking they've got various approaches and how they want to take it. Obviously, the EU is taking a more regulatory approach with introducing the EU AI Act.
Mhm.
And you touched on a bit of a timing and the status of that. So maybe go a little bit further into where that's at and
Sure.
what the current state is.
Yeah, so the EU AI Act, it's been roughly 3 years in the making, and on the 13th of March, quite recently, in fact, the Parliament in plenary session voted to adopt the AI Act, and it was a significant majority. Um, and that's, look, it's acknowledged as a significant step in the regulation of AI. Um, it was approved in principle because there's still a kind of still a bit of work in finalizing the act because the text is still being worked on by lawyer linguists to ensure there's no inconsistencies or inaccuracies, which means that the Parliament will kind of take another step to endorse it in April. And they use this process called the corrigendum process. And it's kind of more of a formal endorsement rather than a vote. You'd also see then the European Council, who are the member states and their co-legislators, giving their formal endorsement. So what you're likely to see is that the EU AIF Act itself is likely to take effect in May or early June, based on some of the material I've seen. Um, I suppose the question then is, what does the AI Act look like? It
Some of
has
the
a
key
lot of,
features.
yeah.
Yeah.
What are the features? I mean, there's different features, and those features come in at different times. So for our viewers, they might be interested in that. Essentially, what does it do? Well, it does a number of things. Well, first of all, it actually puts a definition on AI, which I know sounds kind of strange thing to say, but if you think about it, intelligence itself is difficult to define, and therefore it's difficult legally to define artificial intelligence. But what's really positive is that the AI Act itself is in line with an OECD definition, so it does kind of have an international feel to it. So, like, essentially, this is a suite of technologies where um, it infers outputs from inputs that we put in. And what are those kind of outputs? Well, they're predictions or content recommendations or decisions um, that could affect a physical or a virtual environment. What would the scope of this be? Well, the scope it'll apply to all AI systems impacting people in the EU. If you think about what I just said there, that means it has an extraterritorial impact as well. Because if you think about it, a system could be built or operated outside the EU, but its impact could happen in the EU and therefore would have an extraterritorial impact. And it's both applying to kind of the development and the deployment of AI. So that means it could, it'll have impacts across all the sectors. And there's different obligations then on developers and deployers. But the central thrust of it, I mean, we could be talking ad infinitum about, all of the different articles and so on. But the central thrust of this is about safeguarding people's safety and rights. Okay. And the approach is a risk-based approach. So it works on the idea that certain uses of AI would be prohibited, right? And then certain other ones are viewed as high risk, um, and they would actually have obligations on them. So you'll still be able to use them, but there will be actually regulatory requirements, so kind of technical and organizational requirements. And then there's other ones then that have low usage, um, sorry, low risk usage. Correct myself there. Um, and they would have more kind of minimal transparency requirements. So something like that would be prohibited would be things like or emotional recognition systems in the workplace. Although there's some exemptions for that in transport. There's a case of, say, airplane monitoring a pilot to detect drowsiness, for instance. Like there's a situation where it's needed for safety reasons, so therefore that wouldn't be prohibited. But if you were maybe using biometric categorization to infer sensitive data about person, that would be prohibited. Okay. Um, the kind of high risk ones that maybe everybody could identify with would be, well, there's going to be safety components of products, say in medical devices, right? So that's one piece, or maybe it's a standalone system um, where it poses a risk to someone's safety or rights. And one that probably everybody would be aware of is that, employment, worker management, recruitment, performance management. If you were using AI in those areas, that would be deemed high risk. Um, in which case, then there would be requirements around the use of that safely. Minimal risk ones would be kind of more like chatbots, where it's not likely that the chatbot's going to cause a risk to your safety or your rights. And in which case, then there would be kind of their transparency that I have to know that I'm talking to a chatbot as opposed to a real person. And such companies would be invited to, commit to voluntary codes of conduct. There would be rules as well on general purpose AI, and then again, there's kind of a risk-based approach with that one. It's where there's kind of systemic risks, or it's deemed that there's a systemic risk that you'd have more obligations. But you can see it's a risk-based law, which is kind of positive. You'd have a number of requirements. You've different requirements. You'd like have risk and quality management systems, data governance. You'd have to keep technical documentation on the AI you're using. There'd be standards and so on. But a lot of this material will still have to be developed after the AI Act has actually been has put into place. In other words, there'll be kind of secondary legislation and technical guidance will have to be developed to help people comply with this law. It is complex, definitely.
Yeah.
And so what you're really looking at, if we follow the timeline that I mentioned of, say, the middle of this year, the bans I talked about would apply from early 2025. There would be rules then for general purpose AI, or the generative AI from mid 2025. And in terms of the high risk requirements, which, to be honest with you, a lot of people think that's where a lot of the regulatory requirements are going to lie. You're talking about mid 2026 and mid 2027, depending on which annex it falls into. But it's going to impact a lot of sectors who either are involved in the development or maybe the use of AI. So it's a strategic technology. So we would expect, it's going to have big impacts.
Yeah, so there are implications for both businesses of AI and those that would be the users of AI technologies.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And so, like I said earlier, different states around the world have different approaches to,
Mm-hmm.
To AI in general. We're starting to hear the instances where other countries are coming in and trying to lure some of our AI companies to their states with incentives and other things, and sometimes stating that or implying at the very least that it's going to be so complex to be an AI business in the EU. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I've certainly read media reports, of competitors trying to attract talent. But I suppose we live in a competitive world, so in a lot of ways that's unsurprising. Okay, like it remains to be seen what the impact the regulation will have and the outcome of this kind of global competitive race, right? You have to acknowledge that regulation does create costs for business. However, on the other hand, regulation does offer the opportunity to engender trust in this technology, right? Because it's about safeguarding safety and rights. So it's going to engender trust in the technology, and it also offers a harmonized approach. I mean, we have a single market of roughly 450 million people, so from that perspective, uh, you can also argue that this law is going to engender trust in the technology, and business supports trusted AI. Now, as I think I said at the start of our conversation, you know, we can't ignore that this is a significant milestone in terms of, well, obviously European governance, but also maybe global governance as well, right? Like we acknowledge, I've already acknowledged that, a harmonized approach and is better than a divergent regulatory approach across Europe. So that's good. But we're going to need, as I think I said earlier, we're going to need secondary legislation and guidelines to support the implementation, right? So when Europe looked at this 3 years ago, they had a white paper, and the white paper said Europe, if it wanted to be a leader in AI, has to do two things. It had to support trust in the technologies. That's the idea, that you regulate, okay? But it also said we've got to support excellence. That means you develop capacities in both developing AI and then adopting it in the best way. So you see, remember, it's a tool, okay? So is it a tool that's helping us in healthcare? Is it a tool that's helping us in manufacturing? Even in our own business, and so that's what that excellence piece is about, right? So the way I would look at the AI Act is, it is a significant step, but it's one of many steps Europe would need to take if you want to be a leader in this space. Like, we've done the trust piece, but we're going to have to take more steps on in this, in terms of excellence. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we're going to have to help facilitate access to capital for investment in this area, right? We're going to have to help business understand the complexity of this act to comply effectively and to create growth. So really, I'm talking about creating conditions and capacities that help us to do that. So, what shouldn't be forgotten is there's a lot of other EU digital regulation, right? So there's regulation on data, there's regulation in say medical devices, for instance, right? And now we have the AI Act. The key thing here is making sure that there's no overlaps or clashes between these laws when we go to implement the AI Act. And I think it'd be important that the Commission, the member states, and business team up to sort out any of those overlaps or clashes and make sure there's an alignment. So the B9 group that we would be part of, has called there last December for the need for competitiveness checks and making sure that the interplay between regulation is working. So that would be very important, I think, especially this year, as we go into a new political cycle. So getting that alignment right is really important. Second thing, we talked about standards. Remember, I was saying we're going to need standards to support the implementation of the Act. So I think the important thing there is to make sure that the standards that are used align internationally, right? So, and because there is a lot of standards out there already, and it's about leveraging that to support the implementation. There's another part of the AI Act which is kind of interesting. It provides for regulatory sandboxes. Now, Jackie, I know you know a lot about financial services and financial regulation and so on. And regulatory sandboxes would be quite well used, I think, in say fintech and things like that. But they're going to provide for member states using regulatory sandboxes. Now, it would be voluntary for businesses to engage with them, but I think we'd be thinking that those sandboxes are a good tool, and they should be leveraged to help business and regulators get AI ready. Remember, because no one's regulated in this area before, so it's about getting those learnings, supporting regulatory innovation. Like, in other words, share those learnings, make compliance easier. Okay. The other thing is, I suppose, in terms of the conditions, you did mention, like, there's other regions that'll compete, of course. But there's other bodies who've also looked at kind of rules and guidance and so on at AI. So there's quite a lot of them. There's work at OECD level, there's work at G7, UN. Like, there's a number, right? So I think it'll be important for Europe working with like-minded partners in trying to set a kind of a global approach on AI that again helps business adopt trusted AI, as I said, and bring benefits to our societies and economies through the use of this, because it's a powerful tool, a lot of opportunity in it. The other thing I suppose is, yeah, I think I touched on it earlier as well, is greater investment, right? So the excellence piece. So I've talked about things like which are conditions, but what about capacity? So like, there's capacities in organizations, capacities in individuals to adopt regulations. So adopt to this regulation, and to the technology itself. So like, we're talking about skills, we're talking about AI literacy, right? Then we're talking about advanced AI skills. So we're going to have a lot of different pathways to help individuals get AI ready. So whether you're in the workplace at the moment, you need to be upskilled, reskilled, or maybe you want to be a specialist in this area, and then it's kind of part of a pipeline to get those skills. So there's going to be an awful lot of investment necessary in skills. In our own country, we believe that the National Training Fund that employers pay should be leveraged to help in part of that process. But it's an international challenge that we're going to need people with the skills. And when I talk about the skills, I don't mean just that you've got the skills to make AI, but you're tech savvy, maybe, is what I'm that
Yeah. And how are you using them, and the rules around that, and
absolutely.
how jobs are evolving, not being
Yeah.
replaced by AI, but the opportunities that exist for those to upskill and to manage these systems as they become implemented in organizations.
Absolutely, Jackie, absolutely, and it's not just private sector organizations; it'll be
Yeah.
public sector as well. The people who make the rules, like the regulators, like, so it's across society that we're talking here. And the other capacities we're talking about is R&D. We need to invest in that more. We need to also, I suppose, create the capacity for greater private sector involvement. So that's completing this capital markets union at EU level as well. So I suppose, in short, I know it's a very long-winded way of answering your question, but in
Well,
short, I
it's
suppose
a big topic, Eric.
it is, and like, it's a really, I think it's a really exciting topic. And
It is. Yeah.
in short, what would I say? Like, the vote on the AI Act, you have to view it as a start, but we're going to have to implement these rules in a way that delivers the benefits promised by the technology. So as I said, it's about getting that alignment right that's going to help business understand the conditions. And then it's about investing in the capacities, and of organizations and individuals to really, I suppose, leverage the benefits, which are really productivity, okay? And as you said, augmenting people. I mean, all the data to date, I think we kind of touched on it in your comment earlier on. Um, the research to date, like from World Economic Forum, OECD, ILO, even our own expert group on future skill needs, is basically all pointing to the fact that is currently, at the moment anyway, it would be that AI should be viewed as a kind of net job creator, right? But what's really going to happen, the impact in the workplace, is more going to be that it will lead to kind of reorganization of tasks. And that again comes back to that skills point, that being ready to be able to, suppose, seize the benefits or spot the benefits of it. Remember now, AI is a suite of technologies. We still need people like the entrepreneurs who can see, oh yeah, this is what the technology can do, and let me see how I can use it in this particular domain. And so again, entrepreneurial skills, like, you can tell probably from what I'm saying here, it's about how do we leverage it to augment people and
Yeah.
organizations, I think, is where this is all going.
Yeah. And I hear young people now talking about starting businesses and using AI technology. And so I think it is an exciting topic. It is an exciting time to be talking about AI and navigating it for the future. I like your point about looking at the AI Act as a starting point, because I think, like the technology itself, the act with all these regulations have instilled a bit of fear in some folks, but it is a starting point. And I really think your points about the importance of building trust and excellence are important, because at the end of the day, we're doing this for a purpose, for a reason, and that is to enhance productivity, support our economy's growth, and to solve some of the problems that we haven't been able to solve in the past many decades, but in a shorter time period, using technology that could help us, whether that's health related or otherwise. So Erik, I think this is just the start, and I'm sure we'll have you back again to give us updates. But thank you so much for clearly articulating what's going on, what the implications are for business, not just in the technology business, but more broadly, and the things we should be looking to do as we try to implement the AI Act, as well as partnering with other like-minded folks around the world. So thank you very much, and we will get you back.
Thanks, Jackie. Look, lovely talking to you, and best of luck.
Thank you.